us take some time to reflect on the Word of God together with a sermon titled, The Shout of Joshua. About 3,500 years ago, the Israelites left Egypt, the land of sin, and set out for Canaan, the promised land flowing with milk and honey. Their 40-year journey was a long period of time filled with various types of refinement and various tests of faith. But in the end, as God had promised, they reached the land of Canaan. God vanquished all the peoples living in Canaan in order to give the land to His people, allowing them to carry out the work of conquering it. Throughout the process, God was with the Israelites, and their conquest was fully completed without any difficulties. We can trace their journey from the first chapter to the final chapter in the book of Joshua. The Bible records that Joshua and Caleb were the only two who entered the land of Canaan out of the 600,000 men who came out of Egypt. There was something special about these two men. Not only did they have great hope for Canaan, but they also had steadfast faith in God's promise. Aren't we now receiving God's promise for the kingdom of heaven? The eternal kingdom of heaven is now drawing near. During the 40-year journey in the wilderness, the Israelites grew weary and said, "Wouldn't it be better for us to just live in the wilderness? Or wouldn't it be better to go back to the days when we lived in Egypt?" The Bible describes there were various types of people. In this age as well, there are many people who believe in God and dream of and hope for the kingdom of heaven. But eventually, they succumb to worldly desires, reminiscing about the pleasure they had in the past, or falling into such temptation, and ultimately lose or forfeit the eternal kingdom of heaven. God said that Joshua and Caleb had a different mindset and a faith from that of others. For this reason, He promised that He would surely allow these two to enter the land of Canaan. In this way, we can see the scene where God made a promise and decisively announced it. Today, there are people who foolishly compare themselves to others, thinking, "This person lives such an enjoyable life, and that person lives so merrily. But what about me?" Aren't all the children of Zion receiving the guidance from God to enter a glorious world where no one else can enter? Furthermore, isn't He currently preparing the glorious kingdom of heaven for us? We should have faith in this promise. We should never have the same thought as those who were destroyed in the wilderness. I ask all of you to become those who clearly determine our direction in this age through the history of 3,500 years ago. In Numbers chapter 13, it describes the scene where spies were sent to scout the land of Canaan and then reported what they had explored to the Israelites. The majority spread a bad report among the people, but Joshua and Caleb did not do so. They assured that it was a promise made by God, and that promise would not change at all. They said, "Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." What did Joshua cry out? "We will devour them." Joshua, too, must have felt fear towards the Anakites, the giant descendants in Canaan. Don't you think so? He was likely no different from the other 10 spies in what he saw and felt. However, the difference lay in this. Even though they all saw the same things and felt the same fears, Joshua and Caleb had God living in their hearts and held absolute trust and faith in God's promise. However, others looked at their circumstances, discarding God's promises as if God's promise were nothing, and focused only on the problems they faced in the real world. Hence, they doubted their victory, saying that they would never be able to attack those people, feeling like grasshoppers in their own eyes, while the others seemed like humans. Despite the land being promised to them by God, they lost their faith in God and were discouraged. The history 3,500 years ago is repeated even in our time. Everyone, then what kind of people should we become? Should we become like Joshua and Caleb, having faith in the land flowing with milk and honey that God has promised to give us? Or should we become discouraged and give up, thinking that they are like humans and we are like grasshoppers? In this age, we are now at such a crossroads. We are living in the same position like them. If we do not hold a strong hope for the kingdom of heaven, we too might think, I'd like to try that like everyone else in the world, without making any preparation for our faith, only seeing various conspicuous problems of the world. As a result, this leads to situations where we inevitably put many temptations upon ourselves. Numbers chapter 14, verse 6. Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite assembly, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, He will lead us into the land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." This was the shout of Joshua. We will devour them. If the Lord is pleased with us, He will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. In this way, they shouted that no matter how big and strong their enemies were, no matter how impregnable their fortresses seemed, God had promised to give the land to the Israelites through any means. They had absolute faith in the promises God granted to mankind. And only these two entered the land of Canaan. Among the 600,000 men, aged 20 years and older, who came out of Egypt, only two entered the land of Canaan, a land flowing with milk and honey. Thus, we can understand that God made this history 3,500 years ago to awaken us to the belief that only those who have absolute hope in the kingdom of heaven today can enter the eternal kingdom of heaven that God has promised and prepared. Can't we? As we live in this world, we are constantly surrounded by fascinating sights, enticing attractions, and the appealing lifestyles of many people. These things may spark our curiosity, stir feelings of envy, and awaken a longing to have what others seem to enjoy. However, where should our greatest aim be? The path we are walking on now leads to the spiritual Canaan. Aren't we on the journey to the eternal kingdom of heaven? Satan is scattering and shaking our hearts with tens of thousands of things around us. Everyone, we must stay alert in such times. Instead of thinking, this is not a big deal, isn't everyone else doing it too? We should firmly believe that our lives are clearly different from others. We should become those who can join in the shout that Joshua made at that time. We will devour them. It was not because Joshua had great courage and excelled in running and mobilizing an army that he made this shout. He was convinced that despite his shortcomings and inadequacies, the land of Canaan flowing with milk and honey would surely become the Israelites, because God had promised to give it to them. It is the same with the eternal kingdom of heaven. When we have absolute faith in the kingdom of heaven and firmly believe in God's promises, we can overcome the various temptations and trials of the world. Otherwise, we risk the folly and regret of casting sidelong glances at the world, thinking, that person lives that way, and this person lives this way. At first, matters of the kingdom of heaven are given top priority. Then they become second priority, and then third, with their importance gradually diminishing. This was how the Israelites began to bow down to the idol of the golden calf and were seduced by the women of Moab. We need to understand why God vividly recorded this truly regrettable history in the Bible. In this age, without absolute faith and trust in God's promise, like Joshua and Caleb, on the journey to the heavenly Canaan, we will all be destroyed for various reasons like them during the 40-year journey. The eternal kingdom of heaven is drawing so near to us. It was not because Joshua looked down on those people that he said, "We will devour them," but because the promise of God was so deeply instilled in Joshua's heart. Joshua absolutely believed that no matter how great or small his enemy, he would surely conquer the land because it was the place promised by God. And thus, he was able to enter Jericho, and the conquest of Canaan proceeded very smoothly within God's will. Today, through this sermon titled, "The Shout of Joshua," let us awaken our soul within us. Even if not 40 years, but 400 years pass, our faith must remain unchanged. God also graciously recorded a story about Caleb in the Bible. It was after the 40-year journey in the wilderness and conquering Canaan, so about 45 years after he first explored the land. Since he was 40 years old when he was called to explore the land of Canaan, at that time he was 85 years old. Nevertheless, his faith in God and in his promises had not changed at all. Hence, when it was time to distribute the land among the Israelites, he requested the most difficult mountainous region for himself. The Anakites were living in that region. The Anakites were a race of giants. It was a place inhabited by a tribe known for their great stature and tremendous strength. But this 85-year-old man said, "Now give me this hill country, I will drive them out." Others had already become complacent and were slow in the work of conquest, causing Joshua to become distressed and exasperated. And so he urged them, "How long will you wait before you begin to take possession of the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has given you?" Is this not recorded in Joshua chapter 18? In this age as well, we must possess the same faith as Caleb and Joshua. Just as God promised them the land of Canaan, He has promised us the kingdom of heaven, the spiritual Canaan. To secure the place God promised, Caleb tirelessly pressed on, without growing weary, even at the age of 85, boldly venturing into areas others were too afraid to approach, saying that since it was the promised land, even if the inhabitants were a tribe greater than Goliath, not just the Anakites, he would surely drive them all out. Let us take into consideration the history of Caleb, who proceeded with the conviction that it was the place God promised. God remarked that the spirit of Caleb's faith was incomparable to that of others. Therefore, God gave special praise to Joshua and Caleb and granted only them the privilege to enter the land of Canaan. In Numbers chapter 14, it is written, "We will devour them." It is verse 9. "Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." This was the shout of Joshua. These two men became an example of who was able to enter the land of Canaan. Let's also take a look at how God assessed Caleb. Numbers chapter 14, verse 20. The Lord replied, "I have forgiven them, as you asked. Nevertheless, as surely as I live, and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth, not one of those who saw my glory and the signs I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their ancestors. No one who has treated me with contempt will ever see it. But because my servant Caleb has," what does he have? A different spirit. God said that his faith was different from that of those who fell away in the middle. In the English Bible, it says he had a different spirit, indicating that his mindset was different. God noted that his spirit of faith was different from that of those who fell away, became corrupt, and dropped out. But because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit it. Everyone, Joshua and Caleb, entered the land of Canaan flowing with milk and honey. We should not just see this as a historical event from 3,500 years ago. Instead, to absolutely enter the eternal kingdom of heaven, the promised land that God has assured us of, we must have absolute faith in God's promise, just like Joshua and Caleb. What if we don't have that kind of faith? We would say, people in the world live like this, and that person lives like that. When you take a closer look at the lives of people on this earth, the city of refuge, you will find that all of them are in pain. It is all just wrapped up nicely. The majority of people's lives can be seen in such a way. Therefore, God looks upon the lives of all mankind on this earth with even greater compassion. Hasn't He prepared and created for us a world where there will be no more death, mourning, or sorrow, but overflowing joy every day? Just as He prepared the land of Canaan, flowing with milk and honey for the Israelites, He is now preparing the kingdom of heaven for us. Let us take a look at Numbers chapter 14, verse 30. Let us carefully examine one by one why God selected Joshua and Caleb to be the ones who could enter the land of Canaan. In this way, all of us can become those who approach God with such faith and such hope. Chapter 14, verse 30. Not one of you will enter the land I swore with uplifted hand to make your home, except Caleb son of Jephunneh and Joshua son of Nun. When we consider what Joshua and Caleb did well, it is clear that they never gave up the hope for Canaan, not even for a moment. And they had absolute trust in God's promises. They always had hope in it. By staking their entire future on it, they were ultimately in a position to fully accomplish the task of conquering Canaan. Let's move on to the book of Joshua chapter 18. Joshua chapter 18, verse 3. So Joshua said to the Israelites, "How long will you wait before you begin to take possession of the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has given you?" Here the expression, "How long will you wait before you begin to take possession of the land," is translated into another translation as to conquer the land. God already promised to give the entire land of Canaan to the Israelites, didn't he? Since it was the land that had already been promised by God, part of their mission was to go and take possession of it. However, the 7 tribes hesitated and were complacent with their current reality. They were reluctant to move. Joshua was frustrated because they delayed conquering the land, although God had already promised to give them the entire land. Hence, he said, "How long will you wait before you begin to take possession of the land?" On the other hand, Caleb was not like them. Why did God allow Joshua and Caleb to enter the land of Canaan flowing with milk and honey? Let's take a look at Joshua chapter 14, verse 6. Now the people of Judah approached Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God at Kadesh Barnea, about you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land. And I brought him back a report according to my convictions." Verse 8. "But my fellow Israelites, who went up with me, made the hearts of the people melt in fear. I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So on that day, Moses swore to me, 'The land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance, and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 45 years, since the time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the wilderness. So here I am today, 85 years old. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I'm just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was then. Now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard that the Anakites were there, and their cities were large and fortified. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out, just as he said." Even though Caleb was 85 years old, he asked for the land of Hebron. He asked for the region where the most powerful tribes lived. He believed that God would surely be with him, since that land was also part of the promised land. While others were hesitating, Caleb, at the age of 85, without any diminishment in his faith, approached Joshua and asked to give him the land if God allowed. This was possible because he absolutely believed that the entire land of Canaan had already been promised by God to the Israelites. And thus, God would help him drive out even the most powerful people. Looking at this, we can see that he had a truly different spirit of faith compared to others. Caleb always participated in the work of conquering the land with the faith that even a child could conquer it, since it was the land God had promised. On the other hand, the other Israelites often hesitated to conquer it, feeling fear because they thought the enemies looked stronger than them. How frustrated Joshua must have been. Although they had conquered so many lands up to that day, they were hesitating and fearing to move forward to conquer the land, which was also part of God's promise. It was because they did not have absolute faith in God's promises. The eternal heavenly Canaan is drawing near to us. Who indeed can enter the eternal kingdom of heaven, flowing with milk and honey? Through the story of Joshua and Caleb, God allows us to have a faith to absolutely look to Him, trust in Him, and never lose faith in the promises that He has granted to us. Please do not live a life solely focused on this world. Instead, I ask you to have faith that guarantees eternal joy and blessings in the glorious world where there is no more death or mourning. Let's take a look at the book of Joshua, chapter 1. Let's see verses 1 through 9. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people, get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give to them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Such was the promise of God. I will give you every place where you set your foot. God repeatedly promised to give it to them, no matter how powerful its inhabitants or how treacherous the terrain. Verse 4, your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. In this way, God repeatedly assured him of the land of Canaan, flowing with milk and honey, and He fulfilled His promise according to His word. When the Israelite army was weak, He sent hail to defeat their enemies. God had always been the one who had helped him in this way, and in that direction, with whatever he endeavored to do. We too must experience and recognize that God always helps us in everything we do. Just as Joshua and Caleb placed their absolute hope in the land of Canaan and held faith in it, we too should strive to be like them, so that we all can be recognized for having a spirit of faith that is distinctively different from others. Let's continue to look at verse 6. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Verse 7. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. This is our gospel, where God is always with us and helps us. When we examine every step of the gospel spreading throughout the world, it is God who always opens the way for us. Think about how God prepared the way for Cyrus when he went out to conquer other countries. God opened doors before him so that gates would not be shut and cut through bars of iron, thus creating the situation that gave victory and glory to Cyrus.
고레스에게 승리의 그 영광을 안겨주신 것처럼, 2 Samuel 17장 1절에 보면, 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 2 Samuel 17
Likewise, today, if we have faith in God's promises, just like Joshua who shouted, "We will devour them," we can all become Joshua. Everyone can become Caleb. With such steadfast faith, let us not lose the kingdom of heaven even for a moment. How joyful are those who go to heaven. If we have firm faith in the kingdom of heaven, how joyful will we be? We will be so happy thinking, "Today I've come one day closer to the kingdom of heaven. Since I met God, He has opened this glorious path so that I can return to my heavenly homeland." The Israelites endured their harsh lives for 40 years. But even if 400 years were to pass, I will still never give up on the kingdom of heaven. With this faith, we should become the Joshua in this age, advancing step by step towards the kingdom of heaven. Is there a rule that only men can have the spirit of Joshua? Our sisters can also become the Joshua in this age. We must all have the spirit of Joshua and the spirit of faith like Caleb, who is recognized by God, and never be deceived by the debauchery of this world. It will undoubtedly become a source of regret sooner or later, and it will be very difficult. The path we are on leads to the glorious heavenly Canaan. Let us never forget we are on the way to there, but remind ourselves of this mindset once more, so we can prepare abundant oil of faith for the day Father comes to this earth. May we all be like the wise and prudent 5 virgins who welcome the bridegroom with such faith. In this age, we need the shout of Joshua. We need faith like that of Joshua and Caleb, hoping that none of our heavenly family members will lose their hope for the kingdom of heaven, and that we all will receive a rich welcome into the world promised by God. I would like to conclude the sermon. Thank you very much.